Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. Could we see a delay in Georgia's case against former President Trump? A court document released this afternoon proposes just that, plus a trial date. NTD's Melina Wisecup is at the Fulton County Courthouse, and she joins us with more. So Melina, tell us more about this new motion.
So I do want to be very clear here because we did just get clarification from the Fulton County Sheriff's Office that arraignment and booking are actually totally separate. So there is still an August 25th, that is a next Friday deadline for all 19 of these defendants to come here to be booked by the Fulton County Sheriff's Office. But now there is a newly proposed date for arraignment. That is the week of September 5th. The DA just filed that motion to the court today. She also proposed a March 4th trial date. If we could just show up on the screen here exactly what this document shows, the motion that the DA filed. So I'll read the reasoning for this requested arraignment date and trial date. They said they don't want it to conflict with other court hearings and trials that Trump has, stating the state of Georgia proposes certain deadlines that do not conflict with these other courts already scheduled hearings and trial dates. I do want to point out the March 4th trial date because that is a very special day. So it is Super Tuesday, a day before Super Tuesday actually, and that's the day that the greatest number of U.S. states hold primary elections. So that's a very interesting timing for this trial to unfold for former President Trump, considering he is the leading candidate in the GOP primary race right now. Now, just in case you missed it, a quick update. The first person to respond to these indictments was Mark Meadows. He filed for the court, the case to be moved to a federal court, arguing that he does have protection because he was a sitting official at the time that these actions took place.
Melina, on a separate but related note, there's emerging information about the DOJ's 2020 election case against Trump. Special counsel Jack Smith got very personal information about the former president through issuing a warrant on X, formerly known as Twitter. Tell us more.
Yeah, so Jack Smith, the special counsel from the DOJ, who's leading that investigation and that case into President Trump's 2020 election case there in the D.C. court, he obtained very, very personal information. It was so personal that Twitter actually called it confidential information. The things that he requested and actually got access from a judge, he got all records from October of 2020 to January of 2021. That includes anything that Trump searched on his personal Twitter account, as well as any posts that he made, even those posts that were just drafts. They also got those records, also messages, direct messages that may or may not have been sent that may have only been drafts. They also got information on locations of users' accounts and also any people who Trump blocked or followed during that time period, as well as any users on Twitter who liked or shared the president's post. So it does stretch further than just former President Trump. Now, Twitter, knowing this was confidential information, did try to block this warrant that Jack Smith was requesting, but a judge ultimately sided with Jack Smith. And furthermore, the judge even ruled that Trump was not even allowed to know that this data on him was being collected and shared with special counsel Jack Smith.
Melina, thank you for that report. Michigan's Attorney General is reportedly confirming that there was attempted voter fraud during the 2020 election that could include thousands of voter registrations. The state's Attorney General, Dana Nessel, told Just the News that ahead of the 2020 election, an organization turned in 8,000 to 10,000 voter registration forms, and that, quote, some within those batches were found to be suspicious or fraudulent. He went on to say that some of the forms were legitimate and none of the fraudulent ones were used. He added that it had no effect on any ballot requests. And just last month, irregularities in Fulton County, Georgia, were made public. An error during the 2020 election led to 3,000 extra absentee votes for President Biden, counted during the audit, which was not used for the state's certified vote count. Amid GOP backlash, President Biden touting the Inflation Reduction Act on its one-year anniversary. That's as the White House tries to defend Biden's climate investments by citing the Hawaiian wildfires. NTD's Iris Tao has more from the White House.
It's been exactly 1 year since President Biden signed into law the Inflation Reduction Act, which the White House touts as the largest climate investment in U.S. history, with nearly $370 billion going into environmental projects. And President Biden on Wednesday called it
one of the most significant laws I think has ever been enacted. This law is helping families save thousands of dollars in energy bills every year.
But the question is, did it actually reduce inflation? Inflation did come down over the past year, dropping from its peak at 9% last summer to now just above 3%. But economists say that decline came mostly from the Federal Reserve's intense rate hikes, not from the Inflation Reduction Act. And President Biden himself admitted as much last week at a private fundraiser, saying, quote, "The Inflation Reduction Act, I wish I hadn't called it that, because it has less to do with reducing inflation than it does to do with dealing with providing for alternatives that generate economic growth." And the White House on Wednesday was asked,
what should you call it?
Well, he said, following that sentiment, because I think it's a complicated bill, that it also has reduced costs. And I think it's very important to note that both on the health care and, as I noted, on the energy side.
that's as Republicans say Bidenomics isn't working. Congressman Greg Steube wrote on Wednesday that the so-called Inflation Reduction Act had absolutely nothing to do with targeting inflation. 1 year later, American families are still struggling in the Biden economy. Meanwhile, the White House is now trying to defend its massive spending on climate by linking it with the Maui wildfires.
To stop these disasters from getting even worse, we have to cut the carbon pollution that's driving the climate crisis. And that's what the Inflation Reduction Act is all about.
The White House announced on Wednesday that President Biden is traveling to Maui on Monday. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
Presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy going viral after answering a question on LGBT issues at the Iowa State Fair. His response surprises the activist who posed the question. The activist asked Ramaswamy what his opinion is on the LGBT community. Ramaswamy then said he didn't think it was one community. He says you can't just mash so many different kinds of people together under one term. He mentions how gay people are in conflict with transgender people. When asked her views, the activist says she's pansexual. He also says he doesn't feel it's right to have women compete against biological men in sports competition or share the same locker room with men. He also disagrees with exposing LGBT ideologies to children. At the end of the conversation, he and the activist shook hands. Sales at Target taking a downturn for the first time in 6 years. The retail giant now seeing a drop of 10% in online sales and 5% in stores. On top of that, the company's stock has lost more than a quarter of its value over the past year. Target released its Pride apparel collection back in May in an effort to show support for the LGBT community. The collection included Pride-themed clothing for children and infants. The merchandise prompted criticism from consumers and led to boycotts against the company. The sales decline also comes as consumers are reducing spending on things like home goods, clothing, and other discretionary purchases. As Target continues to deal with its sales decline, overall retail spending in the United States is on the rise. According to the Commerce Department, retail sales in July jumped 0.7%, a much faster pace than the previous month. And moving on to George Santos's case, a person involved in fundraising for the New York congressman now facing charges for allegedly pretending to be House Speaker Kevin McCarthy's aide in order to collect campaign donations. Samuel Meal was charged with 1 count of aggravated identity theft and 4 counts of wire fraud. The case alleges that Meal wasn't just collecting money on behalf of Santos. Parts of those donations also allegedly went into his personal earnings as commission. Meal was arraigned in Brooklyn, New York earlier this week and pleaded not guilty. Congressman George Santos himself was indicted back in May on 13 felony charges related to money laundering and misleading donors. As for Santos's re-election bid, he's now facing another Republican challenger, Air Force veteran and attorney Greg Hatch. Hatch pledged to, quote, restore integrity to an office that's been corroded by fraud. Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.